On the northwestern coast of France lies a small town that cannot be found on any map. Its name is Port-de-Sance. This town is surrounded by dense forests on one side and an endless sea on the other. Tourists rarely visit, and the locals live their secluded lives, caring little about the world beyond their small port town. One stormy evening, when the wind howled at the windows like a phantom, an old wrecked ship was washed ashore. It looked as if it had been abandoned many years ago. The local fishermen were the first to notice it as dawn began to chase away the night. But no one hurried to get closer. Port-de-Sance had its secrets, and the inhabitants knew that some things were better left alone. Renard, an old fisherman with long gray hair, was the first to dare approach the ship. He was a man who claimed that nothing could scare him. The ship looked like a ghost from the last century, covered in seaweed, with shattered windows and torn sails. "There's something wrong here," Renard muttered to himself as he climbed aboard. The smell of age and decay hit his nose, making him wince. As he inspected the ship, he came across several old chests, all locked. In one, which stood half open, he found a diary. The diary was written in a shaky hand that immediately conveyed a sense of dread. Each page told the story of the ship's captain, Jean-Marie Lefebvre, who set sail for America in 1898. Each entry became increasingly desperate, describing strange events on the ship. At first, it was just minor things, inexplicable sounds at night, the cries of seagulls with no apparent source. But over time, everything got much worse. The entries became more chaotic, as if the author was losing his mind. The last page was stained with blood, and the text was almost illegible. "We are all doomed. The curse of the old sailor has come true. Whoever reads this, run away." Renard took the diary to the local historian, Mr. Duval. After reading it, Duval shuddered and said, "This is the story of the ghostly sailor, an ancient legend that says any ship that takes him aboard is doomed. And now this ship is here." At the same time, strange things began to happen in the town. Children disappeared without a trace, and their cries were heard at night. Street lights flickered and went out by themselves. Renard began to feel that he saw shadows on the ship's deck, even when he was on land. Duval, studying the diary, found a map hidden between the pages. It led to a chest hidden on the ship. Renard and Duval set out to find it together. After hours of digging through the wreckage, they found the chest, locked with an ancient lock. "This is not just a chest," said Duval. "This is likely where the curse is kept." When they opened the chest, they were overwhelmed by a horrifying vision: the faces of dead sailors, twisted smiles, empty eyes. Inside lay an old book with strange symbols that Duval could not decipher. Duval took the book to his home and began studying it. It turned out to be an ancient grimoire containing spells and curses. The most sinister was the curse of the ghostly sailor. Anyone who read the spell would be haunted by the souls of the dead sailors until they found a way to lift the curse. Meanwhile, things got worse in the town. People started disappearing, and cries and groans were heard at night. It seemed as if the very walls of the town were soaked in horror and suffering. Renard and Duval realized they had to find a way to lift the curse before it was too late. Duval found an ancient prophecy in the book that spoke of a way to lift the curse. They needed to find the remains of Captain Lefebvre and bring them to an ancient sailor's cemetery, where they had to be buried with a special ritual. But the problem was that the captain's remains were at the bottom of the sea. Renard recalled an old friend, Georges, who had a submarine. They set out to search for the ship at the bottom of the sea. Georges reluctantly agreed to help, knowing the legends about ghostly sailors. At the bottom of the sea, they found the wreck of the ship that had disappeared many years ago. The search was difficult, and the water was cold and dark. After several hours of searching, they found the remains of Captain Lefebvre, covered in seaweed and coral. Returning to Port-de-Sance, they performed the ritual at the ancient sailor's cemetery. Duval read the spell from the book, and Renard followed all the instructions. When the ritual was completed, they heard a loud thunderclap, and the sky split in two. It seemed as if nature itself felt the release from a heavy burden. From that moment, the town began to return to normal life. The missing children came back, though they remembered nothing of what had happened to them. The street lights stopped flickering, and the night cries ceased. Renard and Duval became the town's heroes, though they never spoke of what had happened. The ship remained on the shore, covered in seaweed and salt, a reminder of those terrible events. The locals still avoided it, and children were afraid to get close. But now it was just an old ship, stripped of its dreadful past. Several years passed. The town continued its usual rhythm, but deep down, every resident knew that the shadow of the ghostly ship still hung over them. Some old women claimed to hear a quiet whisper coming from the direction of the ship at night. Whether it was just the wind or something more, no one could say for sure. Renar, who had now become the true elder of the town, often sat on the seashore and looked at the ship. He did not forget what had happened and felt that his mission was not yet complete. One day, a young man named Pierre, who had recently moved to Port-de-Sance, approached him. "I've always been interested in maritime legends," Pierre said, sitting down next to him. "I heard you know the story of this ship." Renard looked at the young man with sadness in his eyes. "Yes, I know it, but do you really want to know the truth?" Pierre, intrigued and persistent, convinced Renard to tell him everything. The story of Captain Leffer, the curse of the ghostly sailor, and the ritual of release, all of it fascinated the young man. He decided he wanted to delve deeper into this story, to find every possible detail that might have been overlooked. Together with Duval, they once again ventured to the old ship. This time, they had more knowledge and understanding and were prepared for what they might find. They explored every corner of the ship, finding more diaries and records that revealed more details about the curse and its origin. Among the records, they found another prophecy that spoke of the possibility of completely destroying the curse. For this, they needed to perform another ritual, this time using special artifacts that belonged to Captain Lefebvre. The artifacts were scattered around the world, and to find them, they would have to travel to distant lands. Pierre decided to take on this mission. He promised to return with all the necessary artifacts and destroy the curse forever. Renard and Duval supported his decision, providing all possible resources and information. Pierre's journey took several years. He visited many countries, facing numerous dangers and obstacles, but his persistence and faith helped him find all the artifacts. Each artifact had its own story and power that was supposed to aid in the ritual. Returning to Port-de-Sance, Pierre was greeted as a hero. Renard and Duval were glad to see him back, but knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The ritual was performed at the sailors' cemetery, where Captain Leffer's remains had once been buried. All the town's inhabitants gathered to witness this crucial moment. Pierre, Renard, and Duval performed the ritual with precision and care, ensuring not to make any mistakes. When the ritual was completed, a strong wind rose over the cemetery, dispersing all the clouds. The sky cleared, and the town felt that the curse had finally been lifted. The ship standing on the shore began to gradually disintegrate, as if freeing itself from the magical force that held it together. Port-de-Sance remained a quiet town on the coast, remembering its old legends and secrets. Sometimes, at night, one could hear the sea whispering about lost sailors and cursed ships that find their way to shore. But the residents knew the main thing is not to lose faith, and always remember those who fight against the darkness for the sake of light. Pierre became the town's new hero, his story passed down from mouth to mouth. Renard and Duval lived peacefully, knowing they had fulfilled their mission. But the ship left its mark on their hearts, reminding them that even the darkest secrets can be uncovered if there is faith and perseverance. The town of Port-de-Sance continued to live its usual life, but now its residents had another legend that gave them strength and faith that even the darkest nights always give way to dawn.